Welcome back. Recognizing the financial challenges facing women across the world and the subsequent impact on their well-being is imperative. While the financial services industry has made progress to address the imbalance, the consequences of historical neglect persist, affecting both young and women approaching retirement. Now, for more on this conversation, we're joined by financial advisor Denise Fairhust. Denise, thank you so much for joining us in the studio this evening. Now, what are some of the trends that you've noted in your business with your clients as well when it comes to women and finances?
So good evening, Marcia. Thank you so much for having me here, and to your guests as well, as well as your viewers. So the trends that we are picking up is significant lack of education as well as knowledge where finance and financial wealth creation as well as retirement, etc. is concerned. A very, very scary stat in South Africa is that only 10%, less than 10% of people are able to retire comfortably with any sense of comfort, and that is quite a staggering number. So, which means it then puts pressure on government in terms of the social services sector, and we kind of understand that that is not a sustainable solution. So the other thing is that we have in South Africa a situation where there are more than 40% of women who are single parents.
Yeah.
So now there's tremendous pressure on these women to fulfill multiple roles. You're looking at working, you're looking at looking after the children, you're looking at caring for the family, you're looking at all of these things, and somehow they, with all of this chaos that they have happening in their lives, it's not a priority for them.
Never mind looking after themselves as well.
Oh, 100%. They are put on the back burner, you know, and we're talking about educated women that are actively in the workplace. So this affects then their ability in terms of, you know, what if something was to happen? What if they can't, you know, something? And the alarming statistics is that dreaded disease as well as like your cancers, etc., are on the increase, but especially with younger women. So what happens to you if you can't earn a living? Who's going to look after your dependents? Who is going to, you know, look after your family? How are you going to look after yourself?
Yeah.
And in fact, you know, make sure that you can get through this, because chances are that you can get through this, but that's the, you know, the reality and definitely a trend that we're seeing. And then more and more women are becoming breadwinners in dual breadwinner families. But then there is unfortunately this legacy matter that we have to deal with in certain cultures, where regardless of your stature and your ability and your education, it always rests on the man to deal with the finances. So women,
even if you're the one who may have more of the finances.
100%. And especially so in that situation with certain cultures, we are seeing that women kind of have to take a back seat and don't have a voice, and have to rely on the man then to make their joint decisions for them. Now, we also know that in South Africa, unfortunately, the divorce rate is quite high. We're looking at only 4 in 10 marriages that will last or live to see their 10th wedding anniversary. Sure. So that is a reality, and that is the stats. So especially with this in mind, women need to start actually looking after, coming to the party and looking after and making sure that they are doing separate financial planning for themselves. So, which is not to say that you're not committed. You know, you are in a committed relationship, but you also are an individual that deserves everything that you can actually do to make your life and especially your future more stable. So the other thing I just want to mention is that scary stat. Only 15% of South Africans, and these are South Africans that have properties, have assets, have dependents, have all of that, have actually got valid wills in place. Now, the horror of this is that should you pass away with all of these things, assets, dependents, etc., that means that you're once again burdening the state with an interstate type of scenario, which can take years in terms of settling, and your beneficiaries in the interim, you know, if they're young kids, what happens to them? So these are, you know, not a very nice picture that we're seeing in terms of trends at the moment.
But also it's very difficult as well, because everybody is complaining about, you know, the state of the economy. And when we look at a UN study that found that women spend about 3 hours more than men on unpaid activities. These are the activities that you were speaking of, you know, taking care of the kids, taking care of the families, and everything else, the household. Over and above, of course, working as well. Now, we're living in an era where we always talk about multiple streams of income, because it just seems one income is not sufficient anymore to look after yourself, let alone to plan for retirement. How would you then advise a woman who's already 3 hours on the back foot to a man to say, how do you utilize your extra time to be able to get an extra form of income?
Okay, so first thing I'm going to say, Marcia, you and I attended recently an amazing event where time management was a very important topic of discussion. So we've got to be ruthless as women in terms of how it is that we spend our time. So a very valuable lesson a colleague, an ex-colleague actually, a current, sorry, did I say ex? I'm so sorry. A current colleague actually taught me is that there's important and then there's urgent. So sweeping the house and mopping the floor every single day, it does not fall into the urgent category. So every single one of us as human beings has got exactly the same amount of hours in a day. So it's about women prioritizing what is important for them. And
I just can imagine women who have a little bit of OCD and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave that dust on that counter, you know, or leave those dishes, or, you know, not be able to make that sandwich the way I'd like to for my child as well.
Yeah.
Gathering those extra 3 hours, maybe a little bit of a challenge for some.
Could be, but once again, it is also a choice that you're making. So are you going to be OCD about a little bit of dust on the counter, or are you going to be OCD about, for example, as a side hustle, you just mentioned very importantly, a single income is not going to cut it in this economy and in this day and age, especially considering that more than 40% of those women are single parents to begin with. So are you going to be OCD about upskilling yourself or a bit of dust on the counter? Because if, for example, if you look at the beauty industry, which I'm also very much a part of, that is a $2 trillion, count those zeros, US dollar industry, and it's growing at phenomenal rates. So the demand is there. So if it's something that interests you, why not actually upskill and have a side hustle doing nails? That could potentially pay for investments for you. So
is that the route that we should then be taking, not to say that, you know, not only looking at side hustles, but over and above that, investments?
Absolutely. So that's, you know, 100%. And you should start saving and investing as soon as possible, because there is a magical eighth wonder of the world, and that is called compound interest. So compound interest basically means you have an amount. It doesn't matter how small or large it is, but if you have the long-term goal in mind, you're putting that amount of money in a portfolio, for example, of funds. And that is going to earn you interest, and that interest is going to earn you interest, and that interest is going to earn you interest, where you are sitting then with your capital that you initially invested preserved, and you literally then, in your later years, in your retirement, you're going to be drawing annuities, for example, from the interest on interest on interest on interest. So,
what advice do you give to your clients, particularly somebody who is a single mom? You know, we've spoken about single mom and those startling figures as well. Who says, look, at the end of the month, after I get my salary and those debit orders go off, I'm basically left with nothing. What do they invest?
So you've got to actually learn with intention to pay your future self before you put a single cent towards anything. Now, the UN also mentions something quite interesting, which is the 50-30-20 rule. And that says, in essence, what you should be doing with your money is 50% goes towards your needs, rent, bond, groceries, etc., etc. 30% should go towards your wants, cars, shopping, eating out, etc. And at least 20% should go towards long-term savings, i.e. for retirement, etc. Now, as you get older, that ratio, as you start to reach retirement age, you kind of now in your late 50s, you're going to, you need to literally flip that entire ratio upside down. And the bulk of what it is that you are earning needs to be going into savings for your retirement. So that needs to be something that, and how do you get that? Because as single mothers, you don't know these things. You're busy. So the best thing to do is to reach out to a reputable, professional financial advisor who can advise you. So you can look at your budget, look at where is that money going to? Is it going to, so the strange thing, okay, when we start earning, it's actually quite funny. So we dash out and we buy a car. Now, we cannot actually drive that car out the showroom before we get insurance on that car. Car insurance is not cheap. We gladly, we pay it because now, and this is for a hunk of metal. Okay? But then when it comes to ourselves, we don't think about insuring and paying ourselves. Now, we worth a lot more than a hunk of metal. Should something happen to you, how are you going to feed your kids? How are you going to feed yourself? How are you going to, if you lose your job, for example? How are you going to pay for that hunk of metal and the insurance? So it's about prioritizing and actually paying yourself first, your future self, before all those debit orders. Because I can tell you now, in every single budget that I personally have looked at, there is some room in terms of saving. Some room. Somewhere, absolutely. And that's we look at it and we find it together, and then we make a plan for how we're going to make this work for you, this money work for you, instead of you working for this money tirelessly, day in, day out, and it's actually not giving you any kind of stability for the future.
I like that. Pay yourself first. Just before I let you go, any other easy go-to quick financial tips that you have for us? Absolutely.
So save. So we have a responsibility as women to educate our children, to educate our friends. Save, save, save. That is the most important thing. Start investing as soon as you can. Even when you get pocket money as a kid. I'm not sure how many of your viewers are kids at this hour, but for parents, they need to explain to their kids, I'm giving you X amount in pocket money. I expect you to put into your piggy bank or into a bank account. Start bank accounts for your kids at birth. Start a retirement annuity for your kids with minimal payment. Because then what you're doing is you're giving compound interest, that eighth wonder of the world, an opportunity to work its magic for the future, for your child, for yourself, for basically everybody.
And I guess you're also teaching your child to get into the habit of saving. So it's not about waiting till you have a huge sum of money to be able to save, but the little bit you have. So if you are getting 20 Rand pocket money, to know that, even if you only save 4 Rand of that and spend 16 Rand, it's just to get into that habit as well.
100%. 4 Rand over several years amounts to a lot of money.
Well, Denise, I will be sure to implement some of those financial tips as well, and I'm sure our viewers will be too. Thank you so much for joining us in studio this evening.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Martha.